All right, hi and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dance to the Music. Thank you for listening, subscribing, watching, all the things. Today's episode number, I don't know as usual, but my guest today is Yasin. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you for tracking all the way out here to Queens. So yeah, I always do a little research before or to prepare for the interview. There's not that much out there that I could find. I found one interview. I'm sure that's on purpose. I'm not sure.
I'm like kind of private by nature, I guess. I'm not like on the internet that much.
Fair
but,
enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But we do, or people do know you as a resident DJ at Public Records. You've worked at the Turntable Lab, amongst maybe other record stores as well. I think I remember seeing you at the Turntable Lab.
Yeah, I worked at Turntable Lab in like the original location on 7th Street from like 2016 until the store moved to the 10th Street, like Astor Place location. So I was at Turntable Lab for like 2.5 years. I can't remember for real. And then I worked at Blue Sun in Williamsburg for a while after that. That record store too.
And now people know you for building your own speakers, sound systems. But I was wondering if you could tell us about Mo before New York City. You don't have to give us your whole biography, but just like, I think you're from Virginia originally.
Yeah, well, it's not that interesting before New York, so yeah.
I wouldn't say that at all, but yeah, just like a few points, and especially I guess what I'm interested in, like, and to go to my follow-up questions is like, I read that you came to New York to pursue DJing, but before you decided you want to DJ, there's some other steps I think that usually happen, like what interests you in music or how, for lack of better words, big was music in your family or in your environment for you to come to that point?
Yeah, I was DJing like, I wouldn't say professionally in Virginia, but I was like trying to gig out in Virginia before I moved to New York. I got into DJing like mad long ago when I was like 14 years old. I think is when I got my first pair of turntables and mixer. So I was in middle school when like I got into it, and at that point it was just like YouTube videos of DMC battles. And I was like, I really wanted to do the battle thing. So I was like learning how to cut and like beat juggle and scratch and all that. That's what initially like got me into DJing, just like being a nerd in my basement, like as a teenager. And then once I graduated from college and I was living back home, so that was like 2014, I invested in like a more professional setup, which basically is just like 1200s and like a proper DJ mixer, and would like do events out both in DC and in Northern Virginia. But like the scene is like mad small in Virginia, i.e. like barely existent out there. So I don't know, I just felt like kind of like limited, and like the main kind of cultural heart of the DMV area like is DC proper, which at that time I felt like I wasn't super connected to. So yeah, I just wanted to move somewhere that was just bigger, have more stuff going on that I could like challenge myself to, you know, from same thing for like a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. Did you have any, like, did you knew people already in New York, or did you make, a lot of people before they move here, they kind of like travel back and forth and stuff and like make connections, or like did you just like, I'm just gonna move and see what happens?
Yeah, no, I definitely had some friends that like already lived here or that knew what was going on. But when I first moved to New York, I lived in Harlem, which was cool, but everything that I was doing was in Brooklyn. So I don't know, it felt like pretty socially isolating to like be that far away from like where everything is happening, at least for like what I was doing, like all of my DJ gigs were in Brooklyn. So that's like, a very long cab ride home at 5 a.m. when your gig is done or whatever. Yeah, I knew a few people when I moved out here, but it took a while, I think, to like start to like really like connect and meet and like build relationships with people like in the music and DJ or record scene or whatever. I think mostly because I lived like so far away from like where all of that stuff was happening.
Really quickly, I want to go back to the DMC practice, because generally that's more like this, you said nerding out. It's really I guess you can consider it nerdy, but it's definitely a part of like what the majority of people call like hip hop culture, as part of like really cutting and scratching and doing all the things. And I was wondering, were you then primarily listening to hip hop, or were you already then like interested in different, even though we had hate the word genres, like, you know, different types of music, or was it also dance music at that time?
Not at all. I was like a super purist when I was like younger. I was like very much on like my, you know, Four Elements stuff, and only listening to like hip hop, and was like very yeah, I was like a super purist about it. Uh, Part of the reason that I picked DJing is because like I felt like I had to subscribe to like an element of hip hop that, you know, it's like, it's almost embarrassing to like talk about now, but like
No,
I can't rap, I can't dance, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, yeah, DJing is like what it's gonna be for me. Like this is gonna be like my contribution. Like that's how I got into it initially. But for me, and I think a lot of people, consuming hip hop music is kind of like what opened the doors to like learn about all other types of genres, particularly like record and like sample digging culture, right? So like you learn a lot about like funk and soul and like jazz music just by like getting into like the samples of a lot of the hip hop stuff
Right.
that we were listening to, and eventually like that comes all the way back around to like everything, right? Because it's like it's the connections are like endless, but it definitely like started and was only like hip hop for me for a while when I was a teenager.
Do you so I don't want to get too personal since you're a private person, but I'm wondering, do you have any brothers and sisters, or like were there like music in the household? Was it a big thing that kind of influenced you as well, or was
Not,
it
not at all. I have three sisters, and I grew up in like a very conservative, like Sudanese household, where there wasn't that much like music going
okay?
on. So I think a lot of it was like a rebellious kind of thing. Like I was in my basement, like kind of like secretly listening to and like
Okay.
learning and like getting into all of that stuff. I didn't even necessarily have like peers or friends that I was like sharing that interest or hobby
Oh
with,
wow.
which in some ways made it like a lot more difficult to like learn and practice. But in other ways, I think it kind of like helped me cultivate like a unique perspective and like approach to what I was doing. Because I don't know, maybe that means like learning bad habits or like doing things the wrong way because there's nobody there to correct you. But um, I've had like a long time to kind of like develop all of that, and I think that's cool.
I'm sure it's also a good thing though now looking back, because you kind of like, even though you might learn bad habits, you then also you're not influenced by other people,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
necessarily looking like, oh, I have to do it like this because that other person is doing it like that. Okay, it makes sense. We already talked about you basically reasoning to move to New York. But what was the thought, or like the intention, or I shouldn't say intention, I should say like the vision or the goal of like, where you like, I'm gonna be a working DJ, I want to, you know, do certain things. Like did you have like a list of goals?
Honestly,
I don't know.
I don't really remember that much. I just knew I wanted to get out of
That's even
Virginia.
better.
I knew I wanted to like leave Virginia. It's mad boring back home, you know. I'm very grateful to like having grown up in Virginia and to like be where I'm from, but it's not necessarily like a place that I ever want to live in again. Um, Also, like the DC that I grew up like going to and feel like I was like shaped by doesn't really exist anymore. It's a very different place now than when I was growing up. And that's not to say that there's like not cool shit happening there, because there's like a lot of like really interesting, really creative, really like dope people like doing stuff. But it's like it's very different than like now than what it was when I was growing up. Um, yeah, the main motivation for me was just like getting out of my hometown and like rest in Virginia. You know what I mean? Like there's not like a lot going on back home. Um, and yeah, I just knew that even if I didn't and still don't in some ways have like a super specific vision of like what I'm trying to do or who I'm trying to be around or what I'm trying to pursue, um, I know that I want like to be like challenged, and stimulated and pushed. And that like Virginia, Northern Virginia, like Reston, Virginia, where I'm from, is just like 100% like not a place where that's happening. You know what I mean? So that was the main
Okay,
motivation
fair
to come
enough.
out here.
And how like, is it correct to 2015 you moved here? Not to
To
be really specific, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just want to get.
I moved here October 2015. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so and then 5 years in is when we all went through COVID and yada yada yada. What? How? Again, like you said, you still might not have the a vision of like what and where you want to be, but how has whatever within those 5 years, a lot of things happen. You know, New York City has a certain influence on people. How has that up until COVID, or like until we all stopped doing things? How has that shaped your, I guess, your artistic drive? Let's put it that way.
I'll give like the super brief like timeline of what happened when I
Yeah, for
moved here
sure.
to like up until the pandemic. So I had like a corporate job doing like digital advertising
Oh, we all love a corporate
operations
job.
at AOL. But that's what like allowed me to like move out here. That's how like I
Absolutely.
afforded it. There was like I was working at the Virginia campus, and then I just like transferred my job to the headquarters, which was in New York. And I wouldn't have been able to like afford to do that out here, but I was also like pretty intentional about this is what's gonna like let me do the move, and then I'm out as soon as I have the chance to. So I moved here in 2015 with a corporate job. I quit that job in like within 6 months of moving here, and I started working at Turntable Lab. So I was working in the record store. I was doing DJ gigs like as they came. They were like slowly kind of like picking up. Um, Eventually, I was DJing like full time pre-pandemic, and the types of gigs I was doing like from the time that like I moved here to like 2019, beginning of 2020, definitely like changed, but like also evolved. I had very little exposure to dance music before moving to New York. Working at a record store, being exposed to like, and in particular, like working at a record store that, where you have exposure to like a really, really like wide spectrum of like the DJ community in New York, like at Turntable Lab. Like, what's really dope about what was dope about working there was that like every type of DJ like came through Turntable Lab. So like whether you're a dance music DJ, whether you're on like Serato, whether you're like a party rocking like open format DJ, like tech, like whatever, any like if you're like a wedding mobile DJ, everybody had like something that they needed from that store. So you're like interacting with like a lot of different types of DJ and like music people. So I feel lucky that we were exposed to like a really wide range of the scene. And I feel like it's really easy to think that whatever niche or bubble that you're in out here is like what's going on. So being at Turntable Lab was like a good like remedy to that, to just like be able to have kind of like a wide angle view of what's going on. So anyway, like if I was like interested in like kind of more hip hop and like open format and like party rock and stuff like early on, in my DJ career, like working at Turntable Lab definitely like stimulated me to like explore other styles, other scenes, other, you know, types of music, different formats of playing, like starting to collect more records and like playing out with them. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how it went down. So like it definitely went from like a lot more like open format, like more commercial gigs to like more dance oriented stuff, and eventually being like playing vinyl more often, not necessarily because it was like a better format, but just because like that's what I had and that's what I was like interested in at the time. So that's kind of like the general scope of like where it started at to like where it ended up being. And I was DJing more or less like full time by the time like we went into lockdown in 2020.
Oh, okay. So, and then based on a previous conversation, I think during lockdown is when you got into building your own, I guess I can call it sound system, speakers. Is that because of the time that you then had, simply because of the time, or was there already a previous, you know, more interest into sound. And I have to disclaimer, I'm not a pro in sound. I know when it sounds good and I know when it sounds bad, but in between it's not. I don't know any of the specifics, but I'm interested in like what your interest was and that pushed you into like building your own.
There was like two things that happened. So like number one, yeah, it was just a consequence of like the amount of time that we had to just do whatever. Because when we went into lockdown, like obviously like all of my gigs disappeared overnight, and that was like my full-time thing. I was working at that point. I was working at Blue Sun like once or twice a week, but like the majority of my income was DJing primarily. So when we went into lockdown, like I didn't have any work. And then that pandemic unemployment hit, and we was chilling for like a little while, and that kind of like gave everybody like a little bit of space to like breathe and to like explore other stuff. A lot of people were getting into like the Twitch streaming like DJ thing, and that's just like not me at all. Like I don't touch the mic when I'm DJing. I'm not that interesting to like look at when I'm playing. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not that expressive. And I don't know, I'm just kind of camera shy in general. It's like I tried like the streaming thing like once or twice, but it was like definitely wasn't for me. So the sound system design was definitely just like kind of like a place to put my creative energy with like all the time that I had. Also like around that time I had a party called Good Faith that I was doing with like an old DJ partner. And we did like a lot of DIY stuff of, you know, like rooftop parties or like basement parties, or we did parties at like clubs too. But like the ethos of that thing was definitely kind of had like a DIY feel. And when we went into lockdown, like a lot of clubs were closing, and it was very apparent to us that like everybody had to like do something to like contribute to what the scene was going to look like whenever and whatever it looked like on the other side of lockdown. So putting together like a PA was an idea that we had to like make that contribution. And at the same time, I was like kind of like thinking about and exploring and like messing around with like music production, specifically like dub production techniques, because like the dub style of just having like a mixing console with like a bunch of faders, like a couple of like send return effects, and then just like bringing tracks in and out was the most analogous to like DJing for me, because it's just mixing tracks in and out. And so if I was interested in production, I kind of just like leaned towards the thing that I was like most familiar with, which is like a mixing console with like faders. And then the more I started to like learn about like the history of that production style, the specific gear that was being used, the producers that were involved, and like how that culture was like really, really integral to sound system culture, like in general, and how like the entire ecosystem of like how that music was being made to like how it was being presented and consumed. It was kind of just like a feedback loop, right? That's kind of what led me down the rabbit hole of like, okay, if I want to understand this production style and like this music, which really influence like everything that we are into as DJs, because like dub music and like that style and like the affecting of it is like pretty ubiquitous in most of the music that we consume now, and most of the music that we're like playing as DJs in like a dance context. It made me think that like, you know, if I really want to understand this, I also need to like understand like the technical and like engineering side of like the sound systems that are like powering this music. And so yeah, that's kind of like what led me down the rabbit hole of like, never mind just like assembling a PA system, like let's just like build one from scratch, mostly as just like a exercise of like learning how it works. So that was 2020. So but yeah, I started with like zero knowledge of like any of that stuff.
Oh, okay. I don't even know how to describe it, because at this point I'm like, if you don't know how to do something, just do it, I guess. That's the only answer.
Everything is on YouTube, you know. That's how
you watch YouTube channel?
Yeah,
like
YouTube and forums. That's how I learned to DJ. Like, yeah, YouTube University all day.
Listen, for real, I learned a lot of things from YouTube as well. Now, okay, so that was starting in 2020. Now we're in end of 24, and you've built a couple of, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to sound it. That's the best way I can describe it as a non-expert, like different versions of speakers, or like, prototypes, I should say, but also together with Booker. Um, and now you also, like, for the last year, have your own space, and I use the word space loosely, because I would like for you to describe it to the world like you would not, I don't want to put the words into it.
Yeah, it's a sound system studio. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
very
that's
good.
that's what I call it. It's just a studio. It's like a place of work. Um, I share a studio with my homie Booker Mitchell. He has a company called Bridge Street Sound, but a lot of people get it confused. But Bridge Street Sound is like fully his company and like
Gotcha.
his
Okay.
thing. And on occasion now we will like work on projects together where I can kind of do some of the like design side of things and like consulting. And Booker is like, he's like a woodworker proper, so he's like the fabricator, but also a designer and DJ in his own right. But Bridge Street Sound is like his company that I am not a part of, but we share a studio together and will often like collaborate on commissions or projects or whatever. But that's relatively recent. So we got that studio together about a year ago. We signed the lease in September of 2023, I want to say. And the first 8 months of that lease was just construction and renovation. So it really wasn't like a functional space up until like last summer. But before that, I was, bless you. Before that, I worked at Ogis. Ogis is the company of Devin Turnbull, who's like a pretty well-known designer and like artist of audio hardware, I think is how he would describe it. But Devin, he did like the sound system at Public Records. He's done like the sound system at like a lot of the Supreme stores and like a bunch of like restaurants and a lot of different types of stuff. He does like more like high-end audio. And I started working for him in 2020, like around the time that I was building my system. So most of the experience that I got was like through working at Ogis. That company kind of like really blew up in the time that I was working there. I was his like first and only employee for a while. So yeah, we got to do some like really cool stuff. And it's like most of the experience and like in design and assembly and like installation that I got was like through working at Ogis. It got like too crazy. And I left that job at the end of 2022, I want to say. So for a while I was just doing my own thing, mostly just DJing. I had my personal sound system that was kind of just like sitting in storage, and was able to like take it out on like a couple of occasions, but most of the time it was just like sitting in a storage space. So the main driver to like find a space was just having like the ability to have that sound system like set up permanently so I could like use it, so I could like tweak it, listen to it, evolve it, whatever. And at the same time, Booker was looking for space to set up a studio that belonged to him because he was sharing a space with his dad at the time and just like needed his own workshop. So it was kind of just like not convenience, but like we were both looking for a space. He found this place in like East New York and asked me if I would be down to like join to like share the lease together. So that's how we like signed on to have a studio together. So when we initially came on, I think we both had the idea that we were going to be like doing our own thing. Like he was going to run his own like workshop and like, continue to like build Bridge Street Sound up. And I was just going to like work on my system and like do my thing and like, maybe throw parties there. But as it's evolved, I think I don't know, the whole thing has like grown, and a lot of opportunities have presented themselves, which has been exciting. So yeah, we're working more closely together now, but still like when it comes to like the design and commission business, they're like separate operations, and he's like he's doing his thing and killing it.
Okay. Yeah. Shout out to Booker. So now I'm going to ask you something, and if we can't talk about it, then we're going to cut it out. But but you just briefly mentioned it over the summer, past summer, you did throw a couple of parties in that space, and I'm wondering what the intention behind those parties were. You can talk about it because I'm not the one. Um,
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah, we threw a
It sounds mad. Sorry, it sounds mad secretive, but it is. It is not like a party that you go to Dice or RA where you buy your tickets. So like, I'll let you describe
it's
it.
an invitation only party.
There
Yes,
we go.
that's
Yes,
for sure. And we are proponents of gatekeeping over here. So I'll be,
we're gonna talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
And so yeah, we were doing like we did a series of like DIY parties in that space over the summer that were like really, really fun. A lot of work, but they were super rewarding and really good. The studio was like not a venue. So I just want to put that on the record. It's not a venue. We don't rent it out for events. We don't make any money off of the parties. What pays the rent there like is our sound system work. So it's like design work, it's consulting, it's commissions, it's rentals. Booker and I started like a rental business, and like that's the primary function of that studio. So we have a showroom that like showcases our rental inventory. We have a wood shop where we build speakers at. I have an office where I'm like doing design work out of. So the main function of that space is like a place of business. But that's what affords us the ability to like activate it in creative and communal ways. So the parties that we throw are, I think I'd like to think that we like do it in like a carefully considered kind of way where it's not motivated by like making a profit, which is like super important, I think, to like the success and quality of like the parties themselves. And so we're not stressed about making sure we pack it out. There's no bar. We make sure that there's like soft drinks and like snacks for people to like feel comfortable and like be able to like be there for like a long time. All of the money that like we make from the parties goes right back into it. And yeah, I think that's like a huge part of like why they're successful, is that it's not motivated by profit, and we can like just focus on what makes them good and continue to like tweak that, because like we're learning at the same time, right? Yeah, the parties have been like really cool.
Yeah, I've been to a couple. I'm wondering, since you said the parties were pretty successful, and I agree with that, but how do you measure success in that sense, since it's not, you don't make it for profit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I measure success by like and it's like hard to gauge, but like the emotional impact that it like has on people, and how different it feels, and the type of experience that's like being delivered, and like what you are getting out of it that you like can't get when you just go to like a club that you're paying a fee and have to like deal with the bar and like whatever at. I think it's successful in that sense. It feels mad different than like going to like a regular club. When we have like a critical mass of people that are engaged on the dance floor, that are like open to like whatever they're hearing, that are staying for like a long time, and that like leave with like a clear sense of like fulfillment, that's a successful party to me. Yeah, and I think that that's like happened a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering, I'm sure you got like the actual like the feedback directly. Like all the things you just described, I completely agree. I haven't been to all of them, but I've been to 2 or 3, I can't remember. So yeah, that's why I asked, like, how do you measure that success unless people tell you exactly how they feel when they leave? Or like, I mean, you can tell also like how people behave and how they leave, but generally, I think it's such I guess we can talk about the gatekeeping part where you control who comes in and who doesn't, to a degree. Like, you can describe it better. But I think because of that, it's such a more controlled, I guess, environment, in a sense, not just physical environment, but also like, yeah, I guess emotional, and like the vibe is just different.
Yeah,
Can't really describe
I
it.
think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so can you talk about how you said invitation only, and I think you, in the beginning, you just like sent out or like invited people like directly. Is like, we having this, come to the party. That's generally how parties are, like if you just even throw it at the crib. But how has it evolved or changed, and then maybe changed back to what, you know?
Yeah, we did, like, we made a few changes like over the course of the summer for like the invitation process, the RSVP process, and like guest list management. I think is like, and just communications in general is the biggest challenge for me in event organizing, and like what I'm most interested in like improving and like learning about, because like the crowd is also like the most important part of the function, right? It's absolutely critical to like a good crowd is like super crucial to the success of the party. It's everything. Like who is there is all of it. When we first started, like I was thinking a lot more about just like the technical aspects of it, like making sure this it sounded good, obviously, and like the lighting and like the spatial layout and whatever. Was like thinking about kind of like all those technical details of like how people move around in the space and whatever. But as like the party went on and as like word kind of spread around it, it was clear that we needed to just be more careful about who was coming, what their understanding of it was, who they're bringing, what energy they're like showing up with, So the first party that we threw was not like officially like a part of the summer series, but it was kind of just the like opening introductory. We call it like a construction party because the place was like mostly finished, but it was we're still figuring things out. So that was kind of like the test run. So what we did was we built our dance floor out of an old recycled wood basketball court from like an old gym in Massachusetts, and we had like a bunch of extra like panels left. So we cut up pieces of the dance floor. We like made a brand out of it. Like we put our logos on it, and like we handed those out as like invitations. So the invitations to the first party were like literally like a piece of the dance floor, and
That's so dope.
I think it like really resonated with people just to like have one like a small physical token to like keep, like a keepsake, but it also, I don't know, it made it more special and like intentional that we had to like physically ride around and like hand these to people. And so everybody that RSVP'd from those invitations, that was like our initial email list for the next party. And the process after that was like we allowed everybody from that initial email list to RSVP with like 3 additional people, which was cool. But what happened was that like by the 3rd or 4th party, if that was like the rule every time, where like somebody that was on the email list can invite 3 people,
it's like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah. Well, like the degrees of separation, like potentially were like many far degrees like removed from like the initial core of people that were like invited to that party, and it just kind of became like a little bit too unfamiliar, where it was just like a party full of like random, well, not necessarily, but like we wanted to be proactive about preventing the party from feeling like just like a room full of like random people, because we had done like a few of them at that point. And so for the sake of like making sure that we had people there that kind of like understood the protocol, knew what the vibe was, and were gonna have the ability to kind of like set the tone for other people that might have like been there for the first time, of just like knowing to like don't talk on the dance floor, you know what I mean, like don't take a long time in the bathroom, just like know how to act, you know what I mean. we wanted to make sure it was like people that were recurring and people that were like invested in like this type of party. So we switched it up to to where we stopped automatically adding people that RSVP to the email list. And we made it like a +1 only. And that had like a huge effect on like the turnout and the quality of the crowd on like the next party after that. So that was, yeah, that was cool. And just like the whole thing is like an experiment, both from like the technical side of like what the sound system sounds like and what kind of music we're playing and like how we're playing it, to how we're curating the crowd, to how we're doing the lighting. Like it's really, we're really lucky to have like just one space and a recurring thing where we're able to kind of like change different variables every time and see what impact that makes, and hopefully like over the long term like continue to like refine and evolve and like improve the experience.
Yeah, it's also like from somebody who comes to the party, when you only give them one person to be, you know, like you can bring one person, it makes you think like, who do I bring? And it's
You
not
better
just,
consider, yeah, you better think about it. Yeah,
consider not just like, do I know how the person act, but also like, yeah, she might not, or he might not come anyway. So I'm not just giving that to somebody who might show up. Like I want somebody who can commit. And I understand life is hard and things happen. Like I'm putting that out of the question, but yeah, it does definitely make you consider like, okay, do I know how that person acts? Like I love that person, but they get drunk, or like, you know what I mean? That's so tiny little details that make a big difference. That I think it's dope that you do that. Maybe not for that particular reason, but it does have a difference. Make a difference.
I think a big thing, well, there's like multiple reasons that we like are doing the +1 thing, but one reason my homie Brian like pointed it out is when you show up to a party in like a big group of people, you're a lot more likely to like kind of remain insular with that group while you're at the party, and it's like harder to like connect with like the bigger crowd. And so if you show up by yourself to a party or like with one other person, I think you're more likely to like engage and interact with like the rest of the crowd there, versus like when you're in like a big group, like you tend to stay like within that group. You also tend to be like more talkative on the dance floor, or just, you know, stay within yourself in general. So that was like another reason. Not showing up in big groups, I think like makes the consistency like throughout the night better, where it's not just like big groups showing up at once. It's like, you know, when you're DJing and like it's dead and you're playing like one vibe, and then all of a sudden the dance floor is full, and it can be kind of like jarring and you're not really sure how to. So for the sake of like just kind of like gradually like building up like how the crowd is like filling in, it's important that people are kind of like steady trickling in, for the sake of making sure people are engaging with like the whole space and interacting with the whole space, and like not talking a whole bunch on the dance floor. I think it's good for people to like come in like small groups, and I think it just makes you be more like intentional and curious and open to like your environment when you're not in like a big squad. Yeah.
And you have to plan. You actually have to make an effort to be there, to get there, to be there. When you showed me the space, so I attended one of the parties, and then afterwards I came doing when there was no party, when it was daylight, and I actually got to see the space in like what it's intended to originally, like a workspace. And in that conversation, I think we ended up talking about the difference, or like the difference between consumption versus experience, what people get at your, I was going to call it events party. And I personally think that generally nightlife, I think there needs to be a healthy balance of like consumers, you know, the people who drink and who support the space, and people who are like simply there to get an experience and who are there for the music and all the things. But lately, or in general, New York can seem very only consumption and just very about big groups of people buying lots of liquor, and everything else is just in the back corner of your mind. Besides you creating your own community, so to speak, what do you think? Are there any other, I guess, ideas that we can to make sure there's a healthy balance, but also like, yeah, I guess let's start there. If there is you having those parties that counterbalance to whatever else is going on everywhere else, that you were saying, I'm not even trying, and I'm not saying you said that to me. I would be like, I'm not even trying to have a party in such and such venue and hopefully, create the vibe that I would like to have. I'm just doing my own thing over here, and I'll invite only the people that I want to invite.
I think the main distinction with not only what we're doing at Pitkin, but with just DIY parties and parties that are not like mostly driven by like trying to make a profit, is that difference between like how you described it, like a consumer or consumption culture versus like a participatory culture. So with our parties, like what we hoping to achieve is the idea that everybody that's there is like contributing to the thing itself. It's not just the DJs, it's not just the organizers, it's not just the hosts who are like, marketing, advertising, and like selling tickets to the people that can like then come pay money and then just like show up and like witness a spectacle or like be entertained or whatever. The dancers, the people that's like help cooking us dinner, the people that's like help collecting the trash, and the DJs, and whoever's operating like the lights, everybody is like contributing to this thing, and everybody has like a pretty significant like impact on like what that experience ends up being. And it's important for like just dancers, people that are like attending parties, I think, to like take that same idea and like translate it to like a traditional club when they go out, because it's like a shift in thinking from like, I'm a consumer that's like paying money and I'm expecting to like be served and entertained in this way, to like, I'm a person in a group of people that is contributing to what's going on. You could take that same idea like off of the dance floor too, right? To like just being a person in your neighborhood that exists, that has an impact on your surroundings, right? So I think that's like the main distinction, that having the ability to throw like a not for profit party gives you the chance to like explore or to communicate. Not that like you can't like be a consumer and have a good time or like contribute to like a like a thing in like a positive way outside of that, but I think the distinction is like a lot sharper at this type of function, right? And I think that's like that's like the opportunity that presents itself to like everybody. Like, let's take this mentality and like we can like translate it to like other ways of like going out or like engaging with other people or existing, whatever.
I think I lost my train of thought here real quick. Within that same conversation, obviously, I think you used the term already, the DIY approach of doing a party. And I think maybe you can talk about it a little bit, where maybe sometimes people don't realize what it takes for DIY. Is like this whole podcast is DIY in that sense, right? But in order to provide something for more than one person and to be a communal experience, takes a lot of work, and work includes like everything else. How do you describe it? But even though DIY, you do it for the community, but you also do it for yourself. But at the same time, it's not that just anybody can come run through and can do the same thing, or duplicate, I guess will be the word, to do the same thing somewhere else. Can you just maybe explain what you define as DIY and like how much work that actually takes? And I'm talking about the space itself. Like you said, you built the dance floor, but I've seen pictures of like the whole space is completely done by hand. Yeah, I can say that.
Yeah. I'll brag about that all day because we're just super proud
As you should.
of
As
it.
you
Like
should.
when we moved into that spot, it was like a complete 3,200 square feet, like a completely open floor plan. There was no bathroom, there was no walls, there was 2 outlets in like the whole space. So when I say it was like a DIY project, like I mean that literally. Like we hand installed the dance floor after like leveling it ourselves. We did all of the framing, put up all the drywall, painted it. I feel like I could like be an electrician now. Like I like did all of the outlets and like all of the lighting. Like we literally like built that place with our hands. So in that sense, it's like literally like a DIY project. Um, Obviously, like the sound system there is like hand built and like custom made. We built the DJ booth. Um, and yeah, and then like from a event organizing perspective, it's also has like a DIY approach of just like going out and like hitting up friends to do security and run the door and ask our friends to like help cook dinner beforehand, and we're doing the lights ourselves and installing everything, and like coding a website to figure out the RSVP process. Like we're doing all of those things ourselves, so literally doing it DIY. And what's empowering about it, and why I'm like such a proponent of DIY everything, is that it demystifies the process of like how things work. So like building your own speaker demystifies the process of how a speaker is built and makes the DIY builder feel empowered to understand what's going on and like not be so intimidated of like this black box that I don't know what's going on behind it. I could do it myself if I really wanted to. Same thing with like throwing a party. You know what I mean? Like if I'm not completely satisfied with my experience in the club, you can like demystify the process of like how a club operates and how a party is thrown by like doing it yourself. It is a lot of work, but not only will you feel like empowered to learn that you can do it probably a lot better than the alternatives with what you're like dissatisfied with, but again, it like demystifies like that process of like there's this like black box that I don't have any like insight into and therefore feel powerless to like change or like do anything about it. But when I do it myself and like go through like the effort of like learning how it works, or collaborating with people, like pooling our resources to like figure it out and like make it work, then you realize, like you learn that you have like the power to like affect a thing or like make some change in it.
Do you think that there's that's the bigger understanding that a lot of people should have, like where you said like I can actually make a change with my like what you just spoke earlier about taking that that feeling that they have when they leave your party, to take that same intention and bring it to everywhere else that they're going. Do you think that people should take that, I guess, take more responsibility in their being in nightlife?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Like not to like get too like grandiose about it, but just to at least impart the idea that like it's possible. You know what I mean? Like you do have some like power in this yourself, and to hopefully make you feel like that responsibility isn't a burden necessarily. It's like something that can like make you feel empowered. You know what I mean?
Because you're right. Because it's easy to complain about a lot of things in nightlife, because they are rightfully so, I think. But at the same time, like you said, we can take it upon ourselves to, make the difference, or at least like make the difference for us. We don't have to. So what going forward, like into next year, whether you throw parties again, or is there things that you have planned, or that it's like things stay the same, or might try it again, or have things changed in the planning process?
We're gonna do another like season. We're gonna do a winter season of parties that I'm like really excited about, because it's been a minute. Like I miss having people like in the spot, and I miss the parties. But I really like the seasonality of it. One, just for like our own sake, we needed a break. Like it was like you said, it was a lot of work to like organize those parties, and we don't make no money off of it. So we took a break from them just to like focus on some work so we could pay some bills. But also, like, yeah, come back with like a fresh perspective, kind of like switch some things up and like do another season, observe and reflect on how that went, make some more changes, and then like do it again. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have a question here that is, it sounds super generic, but because the word has been overused, misused, all the things, I wonder how you define the word community.
I'm not sure if I have
That pause of
a
like
good like definition of it,
for yourself.
but I got some opinions about it. And I like, I'm hesitant to like use that word to describe things that I'm doing, because I think a lot of people like use and abuse the word community a lot, and will use it, will use the concept of community in like really self-serving ways pretty often. And early on, and to some extent I still do understand like my specific sound system practice and my sound system as an extension of my DJ practice, which is to say that it's like, you know, a personal, creative, or artistic practice. And in some ways that's like a selfish thing. So it always felt like a little like awkward and uncomfortable for me to like describe like, you know, a community like around a thing that's meant to be kind of just like a personal, exploratory kind of thing, where like I built my sound system so I can like DJ with it, right? And so I could like become a better DJ and like understand sound, and you know, like the sound system informs like the music, and the music informs like the sound system. So it was definitely like a personal kind of thing. Throwing parties and DJing to like a large extent is like a practice that necessarily like involves an audience, and therefore like a group of people that are like participating in like what makes the thing itself. So it can't be like an individual like endeavor. But so like what I think it means to create or like cultivate a community is to like, you know, encourage like a network of people that are able to like count on each other and rely and like support on each other to like make the thing possible. And so like a community, I think, is like something that I aspire to create. It's not something that I think people by default have the right to just like claim, because you have to like work towards that.
I agree.
And so like I'm very careful to just like not like rely on that. I think community is obviously like super important. We need more and better and like stronger communities if we're going to like keep doing what we're doing. But I want to be like careful about it, because I'd like, you know, it's like a sacred thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's a sacred thing, but I feel like you said, it's the word is so big, and I feel like people use it as like, what's the term? Like this hot word that you throw around, and like it can only be one big community, but I don't think that's the case. I think everyone has their own little communities, and then when there's something, and sometimes they can overlap and sometimes they don't, but I feel like,
yeah,
like your immediate surrounding is your own, it's, you know, it's very tiny. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have
I think it depends on the context of what it is. But like the main thing is that like everybody is like contributing to, relying on each other, and like getting something out of it. So like there's scenes, there's fan bases, there's, you know what I mean, like there's audiences, and sometimes those like groups of people like overlap in like how they function and like what they're doing with like actual communities, but like they're not exactly like the same thing. Like a lot of times like brands will use the word community as a euphemism for like for their like target marketing audience, you know what I'm saying, or target market audience, and it's not the same thing,
right? And I wonder, I have here my question, you kind of answered it a little bit, because I was wondering how much you separate, if you even do, how much you separate Mo the DJ from Mo who builds speakers and community in a and that's exact the what we just spoke about is kind of like the thought behind it, because what and that might not be true, that's what I think is what builds us as an artist, not just as a DJ, even maybe a visual artist or any type of artist, is kind of like the community that we're in, and or like the environment that we're in. That's, you know, how we build our character, that's kind of music we play, like that's our little world, that what I like to call it. But then if you are the artist yourself, that community part is not measurable by people like venues or like the people who promote you as the artist, if you understand what I mean.
Kind of.
So
Keep
no,
talking.
that was the end
Keep
of my
talking.
question. I'm just and in that sense, like how you stated before, like you're more of a private person and you're going against of what everything else is out there. At least that's how I would understand it. But you're still a DJ, you're still an artist, and people book you, and you know people want to hire
Sometimes.
you. It's a whole different conversation. um, and in these days, you know, there's a whole conversation of like, oh, DJs have to have records out and they have to produce in order to be marketed. So that's why I'm saying like there's this artist part and then there's the community part, and then but we are each other's friends and we support each other, like you just said, we support each other, and that's, I think, makes us grow individually and then also as a group or as a community. I'm using that word specifically. But somebody who books you is, I don't think they see all that work that's done where we support each other to grow. They just want to see the flashy part, I guess, or like whatever we can sell. So I'm wondering if you even have a distinction between you, like I jokingly said, Mo the DJ versus Mo who builds community.
Well, for one, I definitely I don't know how successful this is gonna be over the long term, but like I'm doing my best to make a distinction between like how I pay my bills and what I'm doing creatively. So like that's the same reason that it's really important for like the parties that they're like not profit driven. And so like a lot of the, you know, rental events and like corporate stuff that I do, and sound system commissions, like all that is just like business. It's just like how I pay my bills. And like I made a promise to myself a few years ago that I would not pursue DJing anymore, like solely for money. And in like a weird way, I think that like allows you to like make more money DJing in like the long term, or like basically like turning down gigs that you don't want to do, only because like you feel like you have to do it to like pay your bills. And I think it was definitely like healthy for me because it made me stop doing gigs that I didn't want to do or like that weren't fulfilling or like weren't pushing me in like any way. But besides all of that, I think that it's not productive to think about really any creative practice, but like particularly like DJing, because it's an art form that like requires an audience to, unless you're like a battle DJ and like where it's like kind of like more performance based, but like, you know, for a DJ that like is a club DJ that like wants to move a dance floor requires a dance floor. And so like it's not productive to like think of yourself as, you know, this like individual like artist that isn't affected by what is going on out in the world. And I mean that like both like literally like in the club, like on like when you're playing, but also like in general, like any particular DJ is like their style, the music that they play, how they play it, where they're playing it, whatever, like how they present themselves. Like you are like a product of all of like your influences. And you try to like be honest with yourself and like how you like refine that honesty, I think is like what makes like good art. but it's like a product of like it's like a conversation like with the outside world and like yourself. So there isn't a distinction. Like I'm always getting like influences like from my friends that I think are dope, from like feedback in real time in the club, like while I'm spinning, of like what I'm playing, what the crowd looks like when I'm playing, like who's on the dance floor, like who would I want to be on the dance floor when I'm playing, who do I not want to be on the dance floor while I'm playing, you know what I mean? Um, yeah, I'm not just like, not just me, but like nobody is just like some like big like
Shouldn't be.
personality, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't think that's like a helpful way of like looking at it. I might have like thought that way at one point, but I definitely don't anymore. And I think part of like what makes it difficult to like be like a professional DJ, at least for me, is that it kind of requires you to like have that thinking where you have to like, you know, cultivate and then market like a brand. So like you're selling yourself as like, yeah, Mo Yasin, the DJ that builds speakers and whatever. I'm like, sure, those are like, I guess like facts about like what I do and like who I am, but it's not a brand, you know what I mean? And like the necessity to like, you know, create like a narrative and then like package it and like sell it, it doesn't like jive with like how I'm actually like developing as like a music person or like a DJ or whatever.
Right.
And that makes it hard.
Yeah, no, I agree fully, and that's why I think I asked that question, because from the other side of things, from like the more, I guess, the consumer side of things, it is made to like, yeah, very marketable, very brandish, whatever the word is, you know what I mean. What is any of the, you already said you guys doing a winter series like of your parties, any other projects that you would like to share with the public, even though you're a private person? Creative projects, obviously. Like
Not
anything.
really. Like I don't know. I'm kind of doing my
Just
thing
doing
right.
your
I'm
thing.
trying to figure it out.
Where, because I know there's an Instagram of you, but I'm wondering what your, how can people contact you in regards to your system?
They can email me.
Email you. Okay.
you can DM me on Instagram too. Yeah, I'm trying to be better about that in general, like sharing what I'm doing, thinking that other people might even like care, you know.
Oh, you don't think they care?
Not that I don't think that they care, but like I don't know. I think a lot of people like go through this of like they, you know, it's easy to just like get stuck in your own bubble, and then like once it's time to like say what you're doing, you get, you know, there's a lot of noise out there, and like you don't necessarily want to be like contributing to that noise all the time. So I don't know. I'm trying to quiet that voice down.
People will find you. Okay, one my usual question. Can you name me 3 tracks that you relate to dance, or you like to dance to? I keep that question very open.
3 tracks that I like to dance to.
Yeah, or that you like to see other people dance to.
Damn. You won't have to give me a minute for that. Let me come back to it. You got another one?
Oh, I no. The other one is also like a very open-ended question. It's just something that you, any last words that you want to share with us that we haven't specifically, like for the to use your term, for the sound nerds, I haven't really spoken about your speakers like that, because my understanding is so limited and it will be to no use. And I found one interview out there where you actually describe it. I forgot the name of it. It's system. I don't know. Maybe I'll put it in the description. But it's kind of recent, maybe, or like 2 years ago. And Sefer did the pictures.
Yeah.
So where you speak a little bit more about the specifics and the technicalities of the speaker. I just don't like talking about things that I'm not really familiar.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I like, the floor is yours.
I know a little bit about that stuff. I don't know everything. And like the world of audio is like endless. There's like mad people with a lot of opinions about it, and it can get very annoying. I'm still learning, like, and I'm learning like every day. And I want to keep like getting better at it, but like all for the sake of like improving my own like practice, like as like a DJ, and like I never want to lose sight of that, because I think it's easy to, but I do think and I hope to be able to like contribute to like a little bit of education about this. So maybe this is like a future project that will happen. I think all DJs should have like the fundamentals of like sound system, like not sound system design, but like how a sound system like works. It's like everybody should know like the very basics of how it works. Like you don't have to like be able to like design a speaker from scratch, but I think having like a really like basic understanding of what's going on of a sound system, of like just like the signal source of, you know, your turntables or your CDJ or your controller to your mixer to the processor to, you know, the crossover, and like then the speakers themselves, like why is a subwoofer different than like a horn or whatever. Like everybody should like have those like fundamentals down. I know for me it's like helped massively in my own understanding of like how I play. And the more that I learn about how my sound system and how sound systems work in general, the more that it informs how I play. And yeah, I don't know. That's just my little spiel. Like learn like a little tiny bit about like how systems work. Like I think it'll have like a big effect on how you play.
Does it also change, maybe not change, but influence what you play? Like now that you're learning more and more about the sound, do you now maybe you play records that now sound differently to you now that you have more knowledge about it, in a sense of like they, you know, records sometimes they sound different in different spaces.
For sure.
So maybe now that you're listening differently when you play records in your own space, and then like, oh shit, that I didn't know it could sound like that, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. It definitely like impacts like what I play if I have an understanding of what that sound system like is like in that space, right? So like there's certain records like I'm not going to play like super sub heavy tracks if I'm at a venue that doesn't have no subwoofers in it, because it's like it's not gonna like translate. So I'll give you one track that I like to play a lot, but I can only play on a good system. It's this track called Faith by Ecologist. I want to say it's Tokyo Mix. I have the 12-inch. There's like a New York and a Tokyo mix. I don't remember which one. I think it's the Tokyo mix of Faith by Ecologist. And that's got like it's kind of like a dubby house track, but it's got like a really, really big like low end to it. But if you play that record on like a system that like just doesn't have no subs, it just doesn't work at all. So that's an example of something that like I might choose not to play if it's not on like the right system. That's track number one. I got to think of like a couple others, but bass is like the main one where like I might avoid it if it's not on the right system. I'm definitely not like a format snob, you know, but having like an understanding of like, you know, this track was mastered on tape and, you know, sounds best on vinyl. Not everything like does. Some tracks actually sound better digitally, and like depending on like the rest of the system, like you might choose to play it on CD versus just the file versus like the record or whatever. And then like knowing how to like go between formats and like how different things are like mastered and how that may or may not have an impact on what it sounds like on the dance floor. Yeah, like sometimes like a disco track, I would much rather play like the 12 of like the physical record, because if I have that same thing, like the file of it, it's just not gonna sound good, even if it's like a high quality file. Yeah.
Okay. Well, since you still got to think about the tracks, I don't have another question other than any last words, and thanking you for coming here and actually sharing your thoughts with me and whoever is listening and watching. Thank you, by the way, whoever does.
Yeah, thank you for letting me ramble. I don't know.
No,
I'm blanking on songs
you.
now. You know when somebody asks you like, "Oh, what you been listening to?" I'm like, I don't know. Music.
Check my thing. Yeah, no, I know.
I'm blanking. Sorry.
It's totally fine. You don't have to. And also, it's usually like first one is the hardest, and then all of a sudden, as soon as you walk out that door,
I'm sure
they're gonna come to you.
Sure.
But I will, for people who wanna hit up more about the sound system, but also I don't know. I don't want to be like, oh, hit up Mo for to be on the guest list, because that's not how it works. Because if you just, yeah, I think, I don't know. Yeah, you're not going to be on the guest list unless you know him personally. That's what I'm saying.
I think anybody that like
Lies.
really cares and like wants to like that's invested in like this culture of just like a more carefully thrown party. It's like will find them their way like to it. But yeah, hit me up.
I think naturally people gravitate towards
Yeah.
the people who are on the same wavelength.
Yeah, that's what it's more about. Like, I'm not trying to be exclusive just for the sake of it. You know what I mean? This is not a cool guy thing, like, at all. We just want to like preserve it for the people that actually care about it. So if you're one of those people, like, by all means, hit us up.
Cool. Other than that, thank you, Mo, for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you. Bye. See you on the next one. And yeah, hit the subscribe or like button, all the things. Thank you. Bye.